The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the dusty town of Ventura, California, and when the door swung open, the woman who stumbled out looked more like a storm survivor than a passenger, her face marred by bruises that painted a violent story across her pale skin. Lucas Turner had been leaning against the post outside the general store, hat pulled low against the afternoon sun of July 1878, when he saw her collapse to her knees in the street. He was at her side before anyone else even registered what had happened, his strong hands catching her before she hit the ground entirely. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, dirt and blood mingled on the fabric, and when her eyes fluttered open to look at him, he saw fear so raw it made his chest ache. "Easy now," he said softly, his voice like warm honey in the heat. "I have got you." She tried to pull away, a wounded animal's instinct, but her body had no strength left. Lucas gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of every wince and sharp intake of breath that told him where the injuries ran deepest. She weighed almost nothing, as if the violence done to her had hollowed her out from the inside. "The doctor," someone called out, and Lucas was already moving, his long strides eating up the distance to Doc Patterson's office at the end of Main Street. The woman in his arms had gone still, either unconscious or simply past the point of fighting, and he found himself murmuring reassurances he was not sure she could even hear. Doc Patterson took one look at her and cleared his examination table with a sweep of his arm, instruments clattering. "Set her down gentle." "What happened? Came off the stage like this," Lucas said, stepping back reluctantly as the doctor began his assessment. "I never seen her before." The doctor's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking her pupils, feeling along her ribs, cataloging each injury with grim concentration. "Broken rib, maybe too. This bruising is a few days old. Whoever did this meant to hurt her bad." Lucas felt something dark and hot rise in his chest. He had seen plenty of violence in his 30 years, had dealt out his share when necessary, but there was something about hurting someone weaker that made his blood run cold with anger. "She going to be all right, with rest and care." Doc Patterson glanced up at him, one eyebrow raised. "You planning on providing that?" Lucas had not planned anything beyond getting her to safety, but he found himself nodding before he could think it through. "If she will let me." The woman stirred then, a low moan escaping her lips. Her eyes opened, unfocused and glossy with pain. "Please," she whispered, "do not send me back." "Nobody is sending you anywhere," Lucas said, moving closer despite the doctor's presence. "You are safe here." Her eyes found his, searching for truth in his weathered face. Lucas held her gaze steadily, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Finally, she nodded just barely and let her eyes close again. Doc Patterson finished his examination and mixed something in a small glass. "Laudanum. It will help with the pain and let her sleep. She needs that more than anything right now." He helped her drink it, supporting her head with surprising gentleness for such a gruff man. "You got somewhere to take her, Turner. She cannot stay here." Lucas's ranch was 3 miles outside town, a modest spread with a sturdy house his father had built 20 years back. It was just him now, had been since his parents passed during the winter of '76. "My place. I've got a spare room. People will talk. Let them." Lucas watched as the laudanum took effect, the woman's breathing evening out into sleep. "She needs help. That is all that matters." The doctor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You are a good man, Lucas Turner, better than most. I will come by tomorrow to check on her. Keep those ribs wrapped and do not let her do too much. She needs to heal." Lucas borrowed a wagon from the livery, laying out blankets in the bed to make it as comfortable as possible. He lifted the woman again, noting how her face had gone slack in drugged sleep, the fear temporarily smoothed away. She looked younger like this, maybe 23 or 24, with dark hair that would probably shine once it was clean and features that spoke of beauty beneath the damage. The ride to his ranch was slow and careful, every rut in the road a potential source of pain for his passenger. The sun was setting by the time he pulled up to his house, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if his mind had not been entirely occupied with the woman in his wagon. Getting her inside and settled in the spare bedroom took the last of the daylight. Lucas had never been in this room much since his mother died, had kept it closed up like a shrine. But now he threw open the windows to let in fresh air and pulled back the quilts his mother had made. The woman barely stirred as he laid her down and removed her ruined shoes, covering her carefully with a light sheet against the summer heat. He stood there for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her chest, assuring himself that she was breathing, that she was alive. Then he went to heat water for washing and to figure out how exactly he was going to care for a badly injured woman he did not even know the name of. The night was long. Lucas dozed in a chair he had pulled into the hallway outside her room, jerking awake at every small sound. Twice she cried out in her sleep, words he could not make out but that sounded like pleas or prayers. Each time he went to her side, checking that she was not in pain, that the nightmares had not pulled her fully awake. The second time her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her eyes wild and unseeing. "I will not go back," she gasped. "You cannot make me." "You do not have to go anywhere," Lucas said quietly, carefully covering her hand with his free one. "You are safe. I promise you that. Nobody is going to hurt you here." She stared at him, her breathing ragged, and then slowly her grip loosened. "Safe," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Safe," he confirmed. She fell back asleep, still holding his hand, and Lucas stayed there until he was sure she was deep under again, before carefully extracting himself and returning to his chair. Morning came too soon, the sun streaming through the windows with cheerful disregard for the circumstances. Lucas made coffee and scrambled some eggs, though he had no idea if she would be able to eat. He was just plating the food when he heard movement from the bedroom, the creak of the bed, and then soft footsteps. She appeared in the doorway, looking like she might bolt at any second, one hand braced against the frame for support. In the daylight, he could see the full extent of her injuries more clearly. The deep purple bruising along her jaw, the split in her lip, the way she held herself to protect her damaged ribs. But her eyes were clear and alert, taking in everything about his home with the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "Morning," Lucas said, keeping his voice gentle. "You hungry?" She did not answer immediately, still watching him like he might transform into a threat at any moment. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you needed help." He gestured to the table. "And because breakfast is better when it is not eaten alone. Come sit down before you fall down." She moved slowly, each step clearly painful, and Lucas resisted the urge to help her. She needed to do this herself, he sensed, needed to prove she still could. When she finally lowered herself into the chair, she let out a breath that was almost a sob. "I am Lucas Turner," he said, setting a plate in front of her and taking a seat across the table. "This is my ranch. You are welcome to stay as long as you need to." "Laura Owens," she said after a moment, her voice rough from disuse, "and I have got nowhere else to go." "Then I guess it is settled." Lucas poured her coffee, noting how her hands shook when she picked up the cup. "You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to, but when you are ready, I am willing to listen." Laura took a small bite of eggs, chewed carefully on the side of her mouth that was not injured. "My husband did this," she said abruptly, the words coming out hard and bitter. "My husband and his brother, They have been beating me for 2 years, ever since we got married. I finally got the courage to run. Lucas felt his jaw tighten. Where are they now? Santa Barbara, I hope. I took the stage as far as I could, got off in Ventura because I ran out of money. She met his eyes, defiant despite the fear still lurking in her gaze. They might come looking for me. Let them. Lucas's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. They will not touch you again, not while I am breathing. Something in her face softened, just a fraction. You do not even know me, I know enough. He sipped his own coffee. I know you are brave enough to run. I know you survived 2 years of hell. That is all I need to know. They ate in silence for a while, Laura picking at her food with little appetite but making an effort. Lucas could see exhaustion in every line of her body, the kind of weariness that went beyond physical injury. She had been running on nothing but fear and desperation, and now that she had stopped, it was all catching up to her. The spare room is yours, he said when she pushed her plate away. I will be working around the ranch most days, but I am close if you need anything. Doc Patterson is coming by later to check on you. I cannot pay you, Laura said, and there was shame in her voice. For the room, the food, the doctor, I have got nothing. I did not ask you to pay. Lucas stood and began clearing the dishes. You just focus on healing. That is payment enough. She looked at him with something like wonder, as if kindness was a language she had forgotten how to speak. Then she pushed herself up from the table, wincing. I should rest. You should. He watched her make her slow way back to the bedroom. This woman who had crashed into his life like a meteor, leaving crater marks he suspected, would not fade easily. Doc Patterson came by mid-morning, examining Laura with professional thoroughness and pronouncing her lucky that nothing was broken worse than the ribs. Keep her quiet for at least a week, he told Lucas on his way out. No heavy lifting, no riding. Those ribs need time to knit. I will make sure she takes it easy, Lucas promised. The doctor paused at his horse, one foot in the stirrup. Word is already spreading in town. You know how people talk. Might make things complicated for you. Complicated is fine by me. Lucas crossed his arms. She needs somewhere safe to heal. End of story. Just watch yourself. If her husband comes looking, there could be trouble. I can handle trouble. Lucas spent the rest of the day working his land, mending fence lines and checking on his small herd of cattle, but his mind kept drifting back to the house and the woman inside it. He found himself working closer to home than usual, within earshot if she called out, and felt foolish for it even as he did it. When he came in for supper, he found Laura in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot with obvious difficulty. She had changed into one of his mother's old dresses that he had left folded on her bed, and though it hung loose on her thin frame, it was clean and whole. You should be resting, he said. I have been resting all day. I will go mad if I do any more. She glanced at him, almost shy. I am making stew. I found vegetables in your cold cellar and some beef. I hope that is all right. It is more than all right. Lucas washed his hands in the basin, touched that she had made the effort despite her obvious pain. But you should not be on your feet so much. I needed to do something, to feel useful. Laura turned back to the pot. You have been nothing but kind to me. The least I can do is cook a meal. They ate together as the sun set, and Laura told him a little more about her life. She had grown up in San Francisco, the daughter of a merchant who died when she was 19. Her mother had passed when she was a child. Alone and struggling, she had married Richard Owens when he had come courting with flowers and pretty words, not seeing the darkness underneath until it was too late. He was charming at first, she said, staring into her bowl. Attentive, everything a young woman could want. The violence did not start until after we were married, and I had no family left to run to. His brother encouraged it, made it a game between them. Lucas listened without interrupting, letting her tell the story at her own pace. He could see what it cost her to relive it, the way her hands trembled and her voice went thin, but he sensed she needed to say it out loud to make someone else bear witness. "I tried to leave once before," she continued. "6 months ago. He found me before I got out of Santa Barbara. What he did to me then was worse than anything before it. He said if I ever tried again, he would kill me. I believed him." "What changed?" Lucas asked gently. "I realized I was going to die anyway if I stayed. At least running gave me a chance." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I did not expect to find anyone who would help me. I thought I would just keep running until I could not run anymore." "You do not have to run anymore," Lucas said. "Not from here." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Lucas worked his ranch during the day while Laura rested, and slowly began to move around more. She cooked when she felt up to it, mended a tear in his work shirt without being asked, tidied the house with careful, economical movements that spoke of someone used to making herself useful to avoid punishment. It made Lucas's heart ache to watch her, this careful dancing around the edges of his life as if she was afraid of taking up too much space. He tried to draw her out gently, asking her opinions on small things, making sure she knew her presence was welcome and not a burden. A week after she had arrived, Lucas found her standing on the porch in the evening light, looking out over his land with an expression he could not quite read. The bruises on her face had started to fade to yellow and green, less alarming than the first dark purple but still a reminder of what she had endured. "Beautiful, is it not?" he said, coming to stand beside her. "I have never lived anywhere this quiet," Laura said. "In San Francisco there was always noise, in Santa Barbara too, but here you can hear everything, the birds, the wind, your own thoughts. That last one can be a blessing or a curse depending on the thoughts." Lucas leaned against the porch railing. "How are you feeling, really?" "Better." She flexed her hand, testing the healing bruises. "My ribs still ache, but not like before. I can breathe without feeling like I am being stabbed. Doc said that is a good sign, means they are knitting right." He hesitated, then added, "You have got more color in your face, too. You were pale as a ghost when you first got here." Laura touched her cheek self-consciously. "I probably looked like death. You looked like someone who needed help. That is all that mattered." She turned to look at him fully, studying his face in the fading light. "Why are you really doing this, Lucas? Most men would not want the trouble. A married woman in their house, her husband potentially coming after her. You could have left me at the doctor's office." Lucas considered his answer carefully. "My father used to say that we are measured not by what we do when it is easy, but by what we do when it is hard. Helping you is the right thing to do. That is reason enough. Your father sounds like he was a good man." "He was. My mother too. They taught me that strength means protecting those who cannot protect themselves." He smiled slightly. "Also, I have got plenty of trouble already with this ranch. A little more will not kill me." Laura laughed, a small sound but genuine, and Lucas realized it was the first time he had heard her laugh. It transformed her face, gave him a glimpse of who she must have been before the marriage had beaten the joy out of her. "I like it here," she said quietly. "I like the quiet. I like not being afraid every moment. You can stay as long as you want, I mean that. People in town must be talking. Let them talk. Their opinions do not pay my bills or feed my cattle." She shook her head, but she was smiling. "You are a strange man, Lucas Turner." "I will take that as a compliment." They stood together in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, and Lucas felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. He was getting attached to her, he realized, to her quiet strength, and the way she was slowly coming back to life like a flower after a long drought. It was dangerous, he knew, to care for someone who might leave as soon as she was well enough, but he found he could not help it. 2 weeks after Laura had arrived, Lucas went into town for supplies and to check if there had been any strangers asking questions. The general store was busy with Saturday shoppers, and he felt eyes on him as soon as he walked through the door. Martha Hollis, who ran the store with her husband, gave him a look that was part curiosity and part disapproval. "Lucas Turner, heard you have got a house guest. News travels fast." Lucas kept his tone neutral, setting his list on the counter. "Woman who came off the stage looking like she had been through a war. You took her out to your place." Martha began pulling items from the shelves. "People are wondering about that." "People can wonder all they want. She needed help. I provided it." "She married?" Lucas met her gaze steadily. "She is under my protection. That is all anyone needs to know." Martha pursed her lips but had the sense not to push further. She tallied up his supplies while he waited, aware of the whispers happening around him. Small towns were like this, he knew. Everyone in everyone else's business, whether they had a right to be or not. He was loading the wagon when Sheriff Mitchell approached, a man in his 50s with a belly that spoke of too many beers and not enough exercise. "Turner, got a minute, Sheriff?" Lucas continued loading, not pausing in his work. "Heard you are sheltering a woman. Married woman, some say." "I am helping someone who was hurt. That against the law now." "Not against the law. Just want to make sure there is not going to be trouble." Mitchell hooked his thumbs in his belt. "If her husband comes looking, he has got a legal right to his wife." Lucas straightened up, his jaw tight. "He has got no right to beat her half to death, which is what he did." "That is between a man and his wife." "No." Lucas's voice was hard. "It is between anyone with a conscience and someone being hurt. She has got bruises from here to next week and broken ribs. If her husband shows up, the only thing he is getting from me is a warning to stay away." Mitchell frowned. "Do not go making trouble where there does not need to be any." "I will not start trouble, but I will finish it if it comes to my door." He climbed onto the wagon and drove away before the sheriff could say anything else, his knuckles white on the reins. The conversation had put a bad taste in his mouth, the casual acceptance that a man could do whatever he wanted to his wife with no consequences. Lucas had never understood that thinking, had seen too much damage done in the name of marriage rights. Laura was hanging washing on the line when he got back, moving carefully but with more ease than even a few days before. She looked up as he pulled in, shading her eyes against the sun. "How was town?" she called, full of nosy people. Lucas began unloading supplies. "Sheriff wanted to know about you. Some folks have been talking." He saw her tense, the old fear flickering across her face. "What did you tell them?" "That you are under my protection, and that is all that matters." He carried a sack of flour into the house, Laura following. "Sheriff mentioned that if your husband comes looking, he has got legal rights. I told him what I thought of that." Laura sank into a chair, her face pale. "Lucas, I do not want to bring trouble to your door. Maybe I should move on." "To where?" "You said yourself you have got no money and nowhere to go." Lucas set the flour down and crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You are not going anywhere until you are good and ready. I do not care what the sheriff says or the gossips in town, or anyone else. You are safe here. I meant that when I said it, and I mean it now." "Why?" The word came out almost desperate. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me?" Lucas found himself without an easy answer. The truth was complicated, tangled up in his own loneliness, and the growing feelings he was not quite ready to name. "Because you deserve to be safe," he said finally. "Because you deserve kindness. Because in the short time you have been here, this house has felt more like a home than it has in 2 years. Is that reason enough?" Laura stared at him, her eyes searching his face. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand, her fingers curling around his palm. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Lucas squeezed her hand gently, careful of the fading bruises still visible on her wrist. "You do not have to thank me, just get well. That is all I ask." But even as he said it, he knew it was not all he wanted. He wanted to see her smile more, wanted to hear that rare laugh, wanted to watch her blossom back into whoever she had been before violence had tried to destroy her. He was beginning to realize, for her to stay, and that desire scared him more than any angry husband could. The summer heat intensified as July gave way to August. Lucas taught Laura to ride one of his gentler horses, leading her around the property on afternoon rides that gradually grew longer as her strength returned. She was a natural in the saddle, sitting tall and easy once she got past her initial nervousness. "My father used to take me riding in Golden Gate Park," she told him one day as they rested by a small creek that cut through his property. "Before he died. I loved it, but I have not been on a horse in years. You are doing well. Better than well." Lucas let his horse drink from the creek. "Another few weeks and you could probably enter the races at the county fair." Laura laughed, that wonderful sound he had been hearing more often. "I think I will pass on that, but it feels good to move without pain, to feel strong again." She did look stronger, Lucas thought. The drawn, haunted quality had eased from her face, and she had put on a little weight that filled out the hollows in her cheeks. Her hair, washed and brushed, shone dark in the sunlight, and when she smiled at him like she was doing now, his heart did things he was not sure how to handle. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. Just glad you are feeling better." "I am. Thanks to you." She dismounted carefully, leading her horse to the water. "I have been thinking about what comes next. I cannot stay here forever living on your charity." Lucas felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You do not have to decide anything right now. I know, but I should start thinking about it. Maybe I could find work in Ventura, earn enough to rent a room somewhere." "Doing what?" Lucas tried to keep his tone reasonable. "Most respectable jobs will not hire a woman without references, and you cannot exactly ask your husband for those." "I can cook, clean. I am a hard worker." "I am not saying you are not. I am saying there is no rush. You are welcome here as long as you want to stay." He paused, then took a risk. "And it is not charity. You have been helping around the house, cooking, mending. You pull your weight." Laura studied him, her expression thoughtful. "You are lonely out here, are not you?" The observation caught him off guard. "I have been alone for a while now. I am used to it." "That is not the same as not being lonely." She sat on a flat rock near the water, patting the space beside her in invitation. "Tell me about your parents." "You have mentioned them, but never in detail." Lucas joined her, grateful for the change of subject even as he recognized that she was drawing him out the way he had been drawing her out for weeks. "My father was a carpenter back in Missouri. Came west when I was a boy, looking for opportunity. He built this ranch from nothing, just him and my mother working side by side. They were partners in every sense of the word." "Is that what you want, a partner?" "I guess I never thought about it much. After they passed, I was so focused on keeping the ranch going that marriage seemed like something for other people." He picked up a stone, turning it over in his hands. "But watching them, seeing how they worked together, how they loved each other, that was something special. If I ever did marry, I would want that kind of partnership. Not a lot of men think that way. Not a lot of women get to see what a real partnership looks like, I figure. Too many marriages are just transactions. The man gets a housekeeper and the woman gets security, if you can call it that." Laura was quiet for a long moment. "When I married Richard, I thought he would take care of me. I was alone and scared, and he seemed like salvation. I did not realize I was trading one kind of fear for another. You were surviving. Nothing wrong with that. I wish I had been braver. Had left sooner. You left when you were ready. That takes courage no matter the timing. Lucas met her eyes. You are one of the bravest people I know, Laura Owens. She smiled, soft and real, and Lucas felt his heart skip. They were sitting close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in her brown eyes, close enough that it would be easy to lean in and kiss her. The thought shocked him with its intensity, how much he wanted to close that small distance between them. But he did not. Laura was still healing, still married in the eyes of the law even if her husband was a monster. She did not need him complicating things with feelings she might not return. So he stood, offering her his hand. We should head back. I've got chores to finish before supper. If she sensed his internal struggle, she did not show it. She took his hand and let him pull her up, and they rode back to the ranch in companionable silence. That night, Lucas lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Laura moving around in the room next to his. He was in dangerous territory, he knew. Falling for a woman who was not free, who might leave as soon as she was able, who might not feel anything for him beyond gratitude. It was foolish and reckless, and he could not seem to stop himself. He thought about his father's advice, given when Lucas was just becoming a man. When you find someone worth fighting for, his father had said, you fight, but you do it right, with honor and patience. The best things in life are worth waiting for. Lucas supposed he would find out if he had inherited his father's patience, because waiting seemed to be all he could do. August brought news from town that made Lucas's blood run cold. Sheriff Mitchell rode out to the ranch on a Tuesday morning, his face grave. Got word yesterday, the sheriff said, dismounting heavily. Man in town asking questions about a woman. Fits your house guest's description. Said he is her husband looking for her. Laura had been in the kitchen when the sheriff rode up, but she appeared in the doorway now, her face drained of color. Richard, she breathed. Told him I did not know anything about any woman, Mitchell continued, but he is persistent. Going door to door, asking at the hotels and boarding houses. It is only a matter of time before someone points him this direction. Lucas felt protective fury rise in his chest. Let him come. He will not touch her. Turner, I appreciate what you are trying to do here, but the man is legally her husband. If he wants to take her back, I cannot stop him. The hell you cannot, Lucas snapped. She has got bruises that are just now fading from the last time he laid hands on her. You going to just stand by and let him do it again? What happens between a man and wife is their business. That is exactly what is wrong with this whole situation. Lucas stepped forward, his jaw tight. A woman gets beat near to death and everyone just shrugs and says it is her husband's right. Well, I say it is not. I say when someone asks for help, you give it, law or no law, the sheriff sighed. I am not unsympathetic, Turner, but I have got to uphold the law. If he shows up here with a legal claim, my hands are tied. Then I suggest you do not show up if he comes here. That way your hands stay clean. Mitchell looked at him for a long moment, then at Laura. You want to go back with him, miss? No. Laura's voice was small but firm. I would rather die. That might be what it comes to if this gets ugly. The sheriff swung back onto his horse. I have given you fair warning. What you do with it is your choice. They watched him ride away, and then Laura turned to Lucas, her eyes wide with fear. He found me. Oh God, Lucas, he found me. Hey, easy. Lucas took her by the shoulders, gentle but steadying. He has not found you yet, and even if he does, he is not taking you anywhere. I promised you that, remember, you are safe here. You do not know him. You do not know what he is capable of. I do not care what he is capable of. He is not going to hurt you again. I will make sure of it. Laura searched his face, looking for something. You could be killed. If it comes to a fight, he will not hesitate to use violence. Neither will I if it means keeping you safe." Lucas said it simply, a statement of fact. "I will handle you like glass until you are whole again, but I will handle him like the snake he is. Trust me on this." She collapsed against him then, her arms wrapping around his waist as she buried her face in his chest. Lucas held her carefully, feeling the tremors running through her body, and promised himself that whatever it took, he would not let her husband drag her back into hell. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Lucas cleaned and loaded his rifle, checked his pistol, made sure he had ammunition close at hand. He taught Laura how to shoot the small revolver he kept in his desk, watching as she practiced aiming and cocking the hammer with shaking hands. "I do not know if I can," she said. "Shoot another person, I mean. Hopefully you will not have to. But if it comes down to him or you, Laura, you pick you. Every time." "Understand," she nodded, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. That night they sat up late, neither willing to sleep while danger loomed. Lucas kept the rifle across his lap and watched the windows, every nerve on alert. "Tell me something good," Laura said softly from her spot on the couch. "Something that has nothing to do with any of this." Lucas thought for a moment. "There is a valley on the north edge of my property where wildflowers grow in the spring. Acres of them, every color you can imagine. My mother used to pick bouquets and bring them back to the house. She said they were God's way of reminding us that beauty exists even in hard places. I would like to see that someday. Next spring I will take you there. We will pick enough flowers to fill every room in this house." Laura smiled, soft and sad. "That sounds lovely. It is a promise." Lucas met her eyes across the dim room. "Whatever happens, Laura, know that having you here has been the best thing to happen to me in a long time. You brought life back to this house, to me if I am being honest, Lucas." She stood and crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair. "I care about you, more than I should, maybe. More than is wise given my situation. But I do. And I could not bear it if something happened to you because of me. Nothing is going to happen to me." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I am harder to kill than I look." She turned her face into his palm, her eyes closing. "When this is over, when I am truly free, I want to talk about what comes next, about us, if there is an us." "There is an us," Lucas said quietly, "for as long as you want there to be." Laura opened her eyes and looked at him with such intensity it took his breath away. Then, slowly, she leaned up and pressed her lips to his, a gentle kiss that tasted of hope and fear in equal measure. Lucas kissed her back carefully, mindful of her still healing lip, pouring every bit of tenderness and promise into the contact. When they pulled apart, Laura was crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. "I forgot what it felt like," she whispered. "To be touched with kindness instead of violence. You will never have to remember the violence again, only the kindness, I swear it." They held each other through the long night, and when dawn came with no sign of Richard Owens, Lucas allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the danger had passed. But hope, he learned, was sometimes a dangerous thing. Richard Owens arrived 3 days later, riding up to the ranch in a hired buggy with his brother beside him. Lucas saw them coming from the barn and felt everything in him go cold and hard. "Laura, get in the house," he called. "Now." She took one look at the approaching buggy and went pale, but she obeyed, disappearing inside. Lucas checked that his pistol was secure at his hip and walked out to meet the men as they pulled to a stop in his yard. Richard Owens was a tall man, well-dressed and handsome in a cold sort of way. His brother was shorter but broader, with mean eyes and a cruel twist to his mouth. They climbed down from the buggy with the confidence of men who had never been told no in their lives. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Lucas kept his tone neutral, his hand resting casually near his pistol. "We are looking for my wife," Richard said smoothly. "Laura Owens. I have been told she might be here, might be. Interesting choice of words. So she is here." Richard smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I would like to speak with her." "I do not think that is a good idea." "I was not asking your opinion." The smile disappeared. "My wife ran away from me. She is confused, possibly ill. I have come to take her home where she belongs." "Your wife is not confused. She is recovering from the beating you gave her, and she is not going anywhere with you." Richard's brother stepped forward, his hand dropping to his own weapon. "You have got no right to keep her here. She is his wife." "I have got every right to help someone in danger, and she is in danger from you." Lucas kept his eyes on Richard. "Why do you want her back anyway?" "So you can finish what you started. So you can beat her until she is too broken to run again." "What I do with my wife is my business," Richard said, his voice hardening. "Now bring her out here before this gets unpleasant." "It is already unpleasant, and my answer is no." Richard's face flushed with anger. "You are harboring stolen property. I could have you arrested." "She is not property. She is a person, and she has asked for my protection, which I am giving." "Protection?" Richard laughed, a harsh sound. "Is that what you call it? Or are you just using her like the whore she is?" Lucas's fist connected with Richard's jaw before he consciously decided to throw the punch. The man went down hard, sprawling in the dirt. His brother reached for his gun but stopped when he found himself staring down the barrel of Lucas's pistol. "I would not," Lucas said quietly. "I am a fair shot, and I am angry enough right now that I might not aim as carefully as I should." Richard climbed to his feet, wiping blood from his split lip. "You will pay for that. I will have the sheriff out here so fast your head will spin. I will have you thrown in jail for assault. Go ahead and try. But you lay one hand on Laura and I will put a bullet in you. That is not a threat. That is a promise. She is my wife. She is a person who deserves to be treated with respect and kindness, neither of which you are capable of giving." Lucas kept his gun trained on them both. "Now get off my property. Do not come back." Richard stood there for a long moment, fury radiating from him. Then he turned and climbed back into the buggy, his brother following. "This is not over," he called back. "I will have her back, and I will make sure you regret ever interfering." Lucas watched them drive away, his heart pounding. He did not lower his pistol until they were out of sight, and even then his hand stayed near the weapon. He had made enemies today, dangerous ones, and he had no idea what the consequences would be. Laura appeared on the porch, her face tear-stained. "You should not have done that. You should not have hit him. He called you a whore. He deserved worse than a punch." Lucas climbed the steps to stand beside her. "Are you all right?" "No, yes, I do not know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He is going to cause trouble for you now, real trouble. Let him." "I meant what I said. He is not taking you back. Lucas, I am not worth this. I am not worth you losing everything." He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "You listen to me. You are worth everything. You are worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth all the trouble in the world. Do not ever let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." Laura kissed him then, hard and desperate, and Lucas kissed her back with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her eyes were blazing. "I love you," she said. "I know it is too soon and I am still married and everything is complicated. But I love you, Lucas Turner. You are the best man I have ever known. I love you too." The words felt natural, right? Like he had been waiting his whole life to say them to her. "We will figure out the rest. Together." "Together," she repeated and smiled through her tears. Sheriff Mitchell arrived the next morning with a warrant for Lucas's assault. "I do not want to do this," he said, looking genuinely regretful. "But Owens filed charges and I have got no choice but to bring you in." How long? Lucas asked, resigned. Judge comes through next week. You will have to sit in a cell until then. Mitchell glanced at Laura, who was standing white-faced in the doorway. I am sorry, miss, but the law is the law. The law protects men who beat their wives and punishes men who defend them, Laura said bitterly. What kind of law is that? Not a perfect one, but it is what we have got. Mitchell turned back to Lucas. Come on, Turner, let us get this over with. Lucas kissed Laura goodbye, a long, lingering kiss that promised this was not the end. Take care of the ranch, I will be back soon. I will wait for you, she said, however long it takes. The jail cell was small and hot, and Lucas spent a miserable week counting down to the judge's arrival. Several townspeople came to visit, bringing food and words of support. Even Martha Hollies from the general store stopped by, her disapproval apparently softened by what she had heard about Laura's situation. That man, Owens, was in the store, she told Lucas through the bars, bragging about how he was going to teach his wife a lesson when he got her back. Made my blood boil, I do not mind saying. You did right hitting him. Tell that to the judge, Lucas said wryly. Judge Harold Thompson arrived in Ventura the following Tuesday, a white-haired man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. The trial, such as it was, took place in the saloon since the town had no courthouse. Richard Owens testified first, painting a picture of himself as the wronged husband and Lucas as the interfering villain who had stolen his wife. His brother backed him up, adding embellishments that made Lucas sound like a dangerous criminal. Then it was Laura's turn to speak. She stood before the judge with her head high, the fading bruises still visible on her face, and told the truth. She described 2 years of systematic abuse, the beatings that left her unable to walk, the threats that kept her silent. She showed the judge her ribs, still tender where they had been broken, and the scars on her arms from cigarette burns. My husband did this to me, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He did it regularly and with pleasure. Lucas Turner saved my life. He gave me shelter when I had nowhere else to go. He treated me with kindness when all I had known was cruelty. If loving him for that makes me guilty, then I am guilty, but punishing him for being a good man is wrong. The saloon was silent when she finished. Judge Thompson studied her for a long moment, then turned to Richard Owens. Do you deny these accusations? What I do in the privacy of my own marriage is not this court's concern, Richard said stiffly. Actually, it is. Assault is assault, regardless of marital status. The judge looked at Lucas. Mr. Turner, you admitted to striking Mr. Owens. Do you regret your actions? Lucas stood. No, sir. He insulted the woman I love. In my book, that deserves a response, even knowing it would land you in jail even then. Judge Thompson nodded slowly. Mrs. Owens, do you wish to return to your husband? No, Your Honor, I would rather die. That is what I thought. The judge shuffled his papers. Mr. Owens, I am finding your wife's testimony credible. The physical evidence of abuse is clear. While I cannot dissolve your marriage without a formal divorce proceeding, I can and will issue a restraining order preventing you from coming within 100 yards of Laura Owens. If you violate that order, you will go to jail. As for you, Mr. Turner, I find you guilty of assault. Your fine is $5 and time served. Case dismissed. The saloon erupted in applause. Lucas sagged with relief, hardly believing it was over. Richard Owens stood, his face purple with rage. This is an outrage. That man stole my wife. Your wife made her own choice, and I am upholding her right to do so. Now get out of my sight before I add contempt of court to your problems. Judge Thompson banged his gavel. Next case. Lucas found Laura outside, and she ran into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. It is over. We are free. Not quite yet, Lucas said, holding her close. You are still married in the eyes of the law, but we can file for divorce now. The judge gave us that much. How long does a divorce take? Months, probably, maybe longer. He pulled back to look at her. But I do not care how long it takes. I will wait for you, Laura, forever if I have to. You will not have to wait forever, she kissed him softly. Just until the law catches up with what my heart already knows. I am yours, Lucas Turner, in every way that matters. The divorce took 8 months, a long bureaucratic process that required affidavits and hearings and patience Lucas had not known he possessed. During that time, Laura moved into the boarding house in Ventura to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and Lucas visited her every day he could spare from the ranch. They courted properly, like young people without a past, going on picnics and attending town socials and learning each other in 100 small ways. Lucas learned that Laura sang when she was happy, that she loved reading but had never owned many books, that she had a gift for gardening that brought color and life to the boarding house yard. Laura learned that Lucas was patient to a fault, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, that he loved his land with a fierce pride but would give it all up in a heartbeat if she asked him to. They learned together what it meant to be partners, to make decisions side by side, to support each other through frustration and fear and the endless waiting for freedom. Richard Owens returned to Santa Barbara after the judge's ruling, taking his brother with him. Lucas heard through mutual acquaintances that he had taken up with another woman within a month, which only confirmed what he had always suspected about the man's so-called devotion to his wife. The divorce was finalized in April of 1879, granted on grounds of cruelty and abandonment. Laura stood on the courthouse steps with the papers in her hand, staring at them as if she could not quite believe they were real. I am free, she said wonderingly. Actually, truly free. Free, Lucas agreed, taking her hand. So what do you want to do with that freedom? Laura looked up at him, her eyes bright. Marry you if you will still have me. Still have you. Laura, I have been waiting for this day since the moment I met you. He kissed her right there in front of God and the courthouse and anyone else who might be watching. Marry me. Tomorrow, next week, right now, whatever you want. Next month, Laura decided. I want to do it right. I want a pretty dress and flowers and all our friends there to celebrate with us. I want it to be perfect. Then it will be perfect, I promise. They were married on a warm afternoon in May, in the little church in Ventura with what seemed like the whole town in attendance. Laura wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Martha Hollies had helped her make, with wildflowers from Lucas's mother's favorite valley woven into her hair. Lucas wore his Sunday best and a smile so wide it made his face hurt. Judge Thompson performed the ceremony, seeming pleased to be part of a happier proceeding this time. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Laura with all the love and promise he had been saving up, and the church erupted in cheers. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard with food contributed by half the county. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts, and Lucas found himself overwhelmed by the goodness of people, by how many had come to celebrate their happiness. As the sun set and the party wound down, Lucas pulled Laura away to the porch, wanting a moment alone with his wife. His wife. The words sent a thrill through him every time he thought them. Happy, he asked, pulling her into his arms, so happy I might burst. Laura rested her head on his chest. A year ago I was running for my life, convinced I would die alone and afraid. Now I am married to the best man in the world, surrounded by friends, safe and whole and loved. It feels like a dream. It is real, I promise you that, and it is only the beginning. The beginning of what? Of everything. Our life together, our family. He pulled back to look at her. "I want children with you, Laura. I want to fill this house with love and laughter. I want to grow old watching you in the garden and sitting on this porch. I want everything." "I want that too." She kissed him softly. "All of it. Every ordinary, beautiful day of it." They stood together watching the stars come out, and Lucas thought about how far they had both come. Laura, from broken and bruised to strong and whole. Himself, from lonely and adrift to anchored and purposeful. They had found each other in the midst of darkness and created light. Their first child, a son they named James Lucas Turner, was born in the spring of 1880. Laura labored through a long night with Doc Patterson in attendance, and when Lucas finally heard his son's cry, he wept with relief and joy. "He is perfect," Laura said tiredly, holding the baby against her chest. "Look at him, Lucas. We made him." Lucas looked at his son, tiny and red-faced and wailing, and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. God, Laura, I love you so much." James was followed by a daughter, Mary, 2 years later, and then another son, Peter, 2 years after that. The house filled with noise and chaos and the particular magic of children, and Lucas found himself living a life he had never quite dared to imagine. Laura thrived as a mother, patient and loving and firm when she needed to be. She taught their children to read using books Lucas bought from a traveling salesman, helped them plant their own gardens, sang them to sleep with lullabies her own mother had taught her. Watching her with their children, Lucas sometimes had to remind himself that she was the same woman who had arrived broken and afraid, so thoroughly had she transformed. But there were still hard days. Moments when a raised voice or an unexpected touch would make Laura flinch, old instincts rising despite years of safety. Times when nightmares dragged her back to those dark 2 years, and Lucas would wake to find her crying silently in the dark. On those nights he held her close and reminded her that she was safe, that the past could not touch her anymore, that he would love her through every shadow and fear. And gradually, over time, those moments grew fewer and farther between, until they were just occasional echoes instead of daily visitors. The ranch prospered. Lucas expanded his herd and improved his land, and Laura's gardens became famous throughout the county. They hired help during busy seasons, giving work to drifters and ranch hands who needed it, and earned a reputation for fairness and generosity. Years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. James grew tall and serious, with his mother's dark hair and his father's steady temperament. Mary was bright and bold, always asking questions and climbing trees and bringing home injured animals to nurse. Peter was the dreamer, happiest with a book or watching clouds, content in his own thoughts. Lucas taught his sons to ride and rope and work the land. Laura taught her daughter to cook and sew and stand up for herself. Together they taught all their children that kindness was strength, that love was a choice you made every day, that family was the most important thing in the world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Laura back to the valley where the wildflowers grew. It was spring, and the flowers were in full bloom, a riot of color spreading as far as the eye could see. "You promised to bring me here," Laura said, walking among the flowers with wonder on her face. "That first night when we were waiting for Richard to come, you promised we would pick enough flowers to fill every room of the house." "I remember." Lucas joined her, pulling her into his arms. "I've kept that promise and 1,000 others, and I will keep 1,000 more. I know you will." She kissed him soft and sweet. "You have given me everything, Lucas. A home, a family, a life I never dreamed I could have. How do I ever thank you for that? By staying, by loving me, by being exactly who you are." He smiled. "That is all the thanks I need." They picked flowers until their arms were full, then carried them back to the house where their children helped arrange them in every room. The house smelled like spring and looked like a garden, and that night at dinner, surrounded by her family, Laura laughed until tears streamed down her face. "What is so funny, Mama?" Mary asked. "Nothing, sweetheart. Everything. I am just so happy I could burst." Lucas caught her eye across the table and smiled, understanding perfectly. They had built this together, this life of ordinary miracles, and it was more than either of them had ever hoped for. More years passed. James fell in love with a girl from town and married her in the same church where his parents had wed. Mary became a teacher, fierce and passionate about education for all children. Peter surprised everyone by becoming a veterinarian, his gentle nature perfect for working with animals. The ranch passed to James eventually, when Lucas and Laura decided they were ready to step back and let the next generation take over. They built a smaller house on the property, close enough to visit grandchildren but far enough to have privacy, and settled into a comfortable rhythm of helping when needed and resting when they wanted. Laura's hair went silver and lines creased her face, but to Lucas, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her stumble off that stagecoach. Maybe more so, because now her beauty was layered with years of love and laughter, every wrinkle a story they had written together. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for decades. Sometimes they talked about the early days, marveling at how young they had been, how uncertain of what the future held. "You ever regret it?" Laura asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Taking me in that day, all the trouble it caused you." Lucas looked at her, this woman who had been his everything for more than 30 years. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Laura Turner. Every moment of trouble was worth it 1,000 times over. I was so broken when I came here, so afraid and damaged. I did not think I would ever feel whole again. I told you I would handle you like glass until you were whole again, and I meant it." He squeezed her hand. "But you did the real work. You put yourself back together. I just held the pieces steady while you figured out how they fit. We healed each other, I think. You were lonely and I was broken. Together we made something beautiful. The most beautiful thing in the world." They grew old together, Lucas and Laura, supporting each other through the aches and pains and indignities of aging. When Lucas's knees went bad from years of ranch work, Laura helped him upstairs and rubbed liniment into his joints. When Laura's eyesight began to fail, Lucas read to her every evening, his voice bringing her favorite stories to life. Their grandchildren multiplied, filling the ranch with noise and joy during holidays and summer visits. Lucas taught them to ride just as he had taught their parents, gentle and patient. Laura told them stories of the old days, edited versions that left out the darkness and focused on the light. On their 50th wedding anniversary, James and Mary and Peter threw them a party that brought out half the county. The house overflowed with people, multiple generations come to celebrate a love story that had become legend in Ventura. "Speech." Someone called, and the crowd took up the chant. "Speech, speech." Lucas stood, pulling Laura up with him, and looked out at the sea of faces. Friends and family, people they had known for decades and people just born. "I am not much for speeches," he said, "but I will say this. 50 years ago I married the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I had ever met. Every day since then has been a gift. Every morning I wake up grateful that she chose me, that we found each other when we did." "I was not brave," Laura interjected. "I was terrified." "You were brave enough to run, brave enough to ask for help, brave enough to start over." Lucas turned to face her fully. "And then you were brave enough to love again, even after everything you had been through. That kind of courage is rare, Laura. It is what I have always loved most about you." There was not a dry eye in the house. Laura kissed him, long and sweet, and the crowd erupted in applause. The party lasted long into the night, and when it was finally over and they were alone in their small house, Lucas and Laura sat on their bed and just looked at each other. 50 years, Laura said wonderingly. Where did they go? Into this, into us. Lucas took her hand, his thumb tracing the familiar landscape of her knuckles. I would do it all again, every single day, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They made the good parts better. They lay down together, two bodies that had learned each other's rhythms over half a century, and fell asleep holding hands the way they had every night since their wedding. Lucas died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, his heart simply deciding it had beaten enough times. Laura woke to find him gone, and though she had known this day would come eventually, the grief still hit her like a physical blow. But she did not break. She had been made strong by years of love, by the life they had built together, by the certainty that what they had shared was real and deep and permanent. She mourned him fully and honestly, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And when the grief finally eased enough to let her breathe again, she found she could still smile at his memory. She lived another 5 years, staying active and involved in her family's lives until the very end. She tended her gardens and played with her great-grandchildren and told stories about Lucas to anyone who would listen. He saved my life, she would say. But more than that, he taught me how to live it. He showed me what love really looks like, what it means to be someone's partner. I was blessed beyond measure to be his wife. Laura passed away on a spring morning when the wildflowers were in bloom, sitting in her favorite chair with a book in her lap and a smile on her face. Her family buried her next to Lucas under the oak tree they had planted on their first anniversary, and the whole town came to pay their respects. At the funeral, James stood and spoke about his parents, about the love that had shaped his life and the lives of everyone who knew them. My father used to say that my mother arrived broken and bruised, and that he handled her like glass until she was whole again. But the truth is they healed each other. They built a life of such beauty and strength that it still holds us all up, even now that they are gone. That is their legacy. Not just their children and grandchildren, but the proof that love can overcome anything, that kindness is never wasted, that two people can find each other even in the darkest times and create light. The gravestone was simple, just their names and dates and a single line Lucas had requested years before. They loved well and were well loved. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each inheriting not just the land but the story of how it all began. How a woman arrived broken and bruised and found a man willing to treat her with tenderness. How they fell in love slowly and truly and built something that lasted beyond their own lives. In Ventura, they still tell the story of Lucas Turner and Laura Owens, the cowboy and the woman he saved who saved him right back. It has been passed down through decades, growing with each telling but never losing its essential truth. That love is a choice. That kindness matters. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is give it. That broken things can be made whole, that damaged hearts can learn to trust again, that two people can find each other in the chaos and create something beautiful. Their story became part of the fabric of the town, woven into its history as surely as the buildings and streets. Young couples would visit their grave on anniversaries, leaving wildflowers and whispering their own promises. Old-timers would point out the ranch house and tell newcomers about the people who had lived there. The love that had started with a stumble off a stagecoach and ended only when death itself intervened. The small house Lucas and Laura had built for their retirement still stood decades later, eventually turned into a sort of unofficial memorial. Their grandchildren kept it maintained, left it open for family gatherings, preserved the porch where two people had sat every evening and counted their blessings. In the bedroom, on the nightstand, someone had placed a frame holding a piece of paper yellowed with age. It was something Laura had written in the months after their wedding, a private reflection she had shared with Lucas, but that had been found among her things after she passed. "I came to Ventura expecting nothing," it read in her careful handwriting. "I was running from death and had no hope for life. But Lucas gave me both life and hope. He gave me time to heal and space to find myself again. He gave me love when I thought I was unlovable, strength when I had none of my own. He gave me a home and a family and 50 years of happiness I never dreamed possible. I arrived broken, and he handled me like glass until I was whole again. And then, when I was strong enough, he let me handle him the same way. We made each other whole. That is the greatest gift anyone can give." The story lived on, as the best stories do, changing lives and inspiring hearts long after its principles were gone. It reminded people that goodness exists, that heroism does not always look like violence and victory, that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply treating another person with dignity and love. In the valley where the wildflowers grew, a small plaque was eventually erected by the County Historical Society. It marked the spot where Lucas and Laura had picked flowers on their 10th anniversary, where they had renewed their commitment to each other surrounded by natural beauty. "In memory of Lucas and Laura Turner," the plaque read, "who proved that love can heal all wounds, that kindness is never wasted, and that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something beautiful." And every spring, without fail, the wildflowers bloomed in that valley in every color imaginable, as if the land itself was remembering and celebrating a love story that had become legend. Families would picnic there, lovers would walk hand in hand, children would run through the flowers laughing, and the spirit of what Lucas and Laura had built lived on in every moment of joy and connection. Because that, in the end, was their true legacy. Not just the family they created, or the ranch they built, or the town they were part of, but the proof that love matters, that it changes things, that two people can find each other in the darkest times and create light that lasts for generations. Lucas had promised Laura he would handle her like glass until she was whole again, and he had kept that promise every day of their lives together. But what the story really taught was that healing is not something one person does for another. It is something people do together, holding each other steady while the broken pieces find their way back into place. In Ventura, California, in the decades following the Wild West era, they still remembered. They remembered a woman who stumbled off a stagecoach looking like she had been through hell. They remembered a cowboy who helped her up and never let her fall again. They remembered a love story that started with violence and ended with grace, that transformed pain into joy and fear into hope. And they remembered that sometimes, when everything seems darkest, salvation can come in the form of a stranger's kindness, a gentle hand, a promise kept. That broken people can become whole again, that damaged hearts can learn to love, that the past does not have to determine the future. Lucas and Laura Turner proved all of that. They lived it and breathed it and built it into every day of their long lives together. And their story, passed down through generations, continued to inspire and comfort and remind people of what really matters: love, kindness, partnership. The willingness to help someone who is hurting, the courage to accept that help when it is offered, the patience to heal slowly and the strength to love again. These were the lessons of their lives, the gifts they left behind. And so the story ends where it began, with a woman arriving broken and bruised and a cowboy who promised to handle her like glass until she was whole again. Except, it was not really the end at all. It was just the beginning of something that would ripple outward through time, touching lives and changing hearts, proof that even in the wild, rough world of the Old West, love could triumph and goodness could win, and two people could find each other and create something that would last forever. Their graves under the oak tree became a place of pilgrimage for romantics and believers, people who needed to be reminded that happy endings were possible, that love was real, that broken things could be made whole. And every person who visited came away with a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith, a little bit of belief in the power of two hearts joined together in commitment and care. The ranch prospered for generations, each Turner who inherited it treating it as sacred trust, remembering the grandparents or great-grandparents who had started it all. The land was worked with love and respect. The house was filled with laughter and family, and the story was told and retold until every child knew it by heart. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Lucas and Laura were together still, holding hands and watching over the legacy they had built, the love they had shared, the proof they had created that kindness and courage and commitment could overcome anything. They had lived well and loved well and left the world better than they found it. That was their story. That was their gift. And it lived on, eternal and true, a testament to the power of love to heal all wounds and make all things new.